This is my recall brainstorming for the EIP work sample number 3 for the English ASL or for the English secondary setting. So the video that I watched it took place in a social studies classroom. The professor was talking about civil rights era, went into the kind of like the very beginnings of it back in the Civil War, and sort of like went through events as time went on. Um, I remember he talked about um, the Underground Railroad and talked about slavery and about how slavery was abolished, I believe, and then started going more into like the 50s, 1960s. He talked about bus boycotts and Rosa Parks. Obviously, that's kind of the biggest bus boycott. I guess like story that we know, historical story that we are all familiar with. He talked about her and how several other people started to boycott the bus system because of her, and that's kind of what like sparked the civil rights movement. Like that's what really made it. That's what ignited it, really. Um, so talks more about the civil rights era, and he mentions Martin Luther King, obviously, and then he mentioned another gentleman. I only remember his first name was James. Last name was kind of difficult for me to hear in the video. The audio was a little bit fuzzy at that point, so I couldn't quite catch his last name. I'm most likely going to have to look that one up. But he was saying that in the time period of the civil rights era, there were two different kinds of movements. There was the nonviolent and then the violent. He really only touched on the nonviolent, which I believe he did mostly just because he's in a classroom setting and didn't maybe want to get into the gruesome and sort of heart-wrenching violence of the civil rights era. But one of the things that he was talking about in regards to the nonviolent period of time in the civil rights area was the Freedom Riders. He asked the class, like, okay, like, who are the Freedom Riders? And the student answered saying, oh, it was a bunch of white people and black people who rode around the country together to, like, support the civil rights movement and to educate people and to kind of spread it around. And he said that they were right for the most part. They rode around on buses, which is funny because my impression, I thought they rode around on motorcycles. Maybe they did, but he was saying that the Freedom Riders rode around in buses, like desegregated buses, is kind of like a demonstration. And he made it very clear that was part of the nonviolent point in time, or nonviolent era of the civil rights movement. And then he discussed, oh no, it's fallen out of my brain. Oh, right, he was talking about how another source of, I guess, like spreading the information of the civil rights movement was through churches, because he asked the class, like, okay, like, who are the people who were involved in the civil rights movement? And he answered pastors, like preachers. So it would be black preachers who would, in gospel, like in church, while giving the gospel would also spread political news and political ideologies. So that was a really big way that communities, like local communities as well as communities farther away would be able to spread messages and information to one another. Um, and then he went on to talk about President Kennedy, and the administration who passed something in 1963, 1962. I forget the exact name of the bill. Oh, and something else about the Freedom Riders. This is backing up a bit. The Freedom Riders went around the country helping Black people become registered to vote, which is awesome. So anyway, fast forward. Kennedy had proposed a bill to Congress, and I'm forgetting what it was called, but it was lobbied against by Southern Republicans, basically, who were not for the the Democratic bill that Kennedy had proposed. Um, and as of right now, that is all that I can recall. I can't really remember what he left off on. There were other details that I did not quite get in there, but that is all I can recall for right now. So thank you.